Hello, my name is Daniel Chartier, and I am professor at the University of Quebec in Montreal. I direct the International Laboratory for Research on Images of the North, Winter, and the Arctic, which allows, among other initiatives, the translation and dissemination of Inuit works, and which has initiated a project to showcase Inuit literature from all over the circumpolar space. I warmly thank my colleague and friend, Marianne Stenbeck, who has worked for years to establish connection with Inuit culture and within Inuit cultures, and who is behind the organization of this extraordinary workshop. I am grateful to her for inviting me to participate. My contribution to this workshop on Inuit traditional knowledge will be to reflect on the place of written literature as a means of transmitting knowledge in contemporary era. For several years now, I've been interested in this literature, which I've tried to consider outside the political borders, both as an Inuit whole and as a specific literature for each of the Inuit territories. This allows to put into perspective the differentiated development of written literature, depending on whether it concerns Greenland, Nunavik, Nunavut, or Nunatsiavut. I will therefore present here the main publishers of Inuit literature, the share of work for children that they publish, many of which are based on traditional knowledge, and finally, I will take a more specific look at the work of Greenlander Lana Hansen, who wrote Sila, which aims to be a tale on climate change set in contemporary context, but which takes up both the traditional figure of Sedna and the essential concept of time and space that are Nuna and Sila. It is a good example of the use of traditional knowledge in contemporary written literature and a shift in political involvement in Inuit literature, aiming to convince Greenlanders of the urgency of climate change action using traditional Inuit knowledge. The literature written by the Inuit follows a differentiated historical development according to the different territories and colonial traditions. Arrived early in Greenland from the 19th century, and with the first historical anticipation novels from the beginning of the 28th century, it appeared later in Canada, mainly from the 1950s, with the creation of the Inuktitut magazine, then with the publication of personal stories and accounts in journals, and finally by the publication of books from the turn of the 1970s, and more markedly from the 21st century. In any case, the proportion of children literature has grown over the past 20 years, a sign of a double goal. First, that of providing Inuit school programs with literature in the Inuit languages and cultures, and that to pass on geographic, historical, and traditional Inuit knowledge to younger generation. We still lack the tools to fully grasp the breadth of literature written by the Inuit. We have started a project to make a complete list of Inuit authors and works at the University of Quebec in Montreal, which has so far enabled us to identify around 250 authors from all Inuit territories. We have also started writing biographies of Inuit authors. This is the subject of the Inuit Literature website, which now features around 40 biographies and will soon add up to 100. The site also presents work and establishes a timeline from Inuit cultural facts. It is one of the few reference tools for written Inuit literature. When we turn to Inuit publishers, we don't find many of them, but still today we have at least one main publisher in the three main Inuit territories, which are Greenland, Nunavik, and Nunavut. For Nunavut, we have Inhabit Media. For Nunavik, Avatak Cultural Institute. And finally, for Greenland, Milik Publishing. Those are the main publisher of Inuit literature inside the Inuit territories. Let's have a look at Inhabit Media first. Inhabit Media was incorporated in 2006, but has been publishing books since 2000. It is located both in Iqaluit, in Nunavut, and in Toronto. It presents itself as the first Inuit-owned, independent publishing company in the Canadian Arctic. According to the publisher, Inhabit Media aims to promote and preserve the stories, knowledge, and talent of the Arctic, while also supporting research in Inuit mythology and the traditional Inuit knowledge of Nunavimut, the residents of Nunavut. Our authors, say the publisher, storytellers, and artists brings traditional knowledge to life in a way that is accessible to readers, both familiar and unfamiliar with Inuit culture and tradition. Based on the WorldCat catalog as of March 2021, Inhabit Media published 202 printed books from 2000 to 2020. More than half in English language, 1/3 in Inuktitut language, and the rest in other languages, including French. Inhabit Media publishes historical books, but also youth literature as the main mandate, covering more than 60% of its book production. Let's now have a look at Avatak Cultural Institute. Avatak Cultural Institute was founded in 1980. It is a non-profit organization dedicated to protecting and promoting the language and culture of Inuit in Nunavik. The organization has its head office in Inukjuak in Nunavik and an administrative office in Montreal. Avatak received its mandate directly from Nunavik Inuit at the biennial Nunavik Inuit Elders Conferences. Avatak has a board of directors comprising 5 elected Inuit members. Among its numerous missions, Avatak also publishes books. Based on the WorldCat catalog, Avatak Cultural Institute published 105 printed books from 1981 to 2020, most of them bilingual in English and Inuktitut, and trilingual in French, Inuktitut, and English, and some of them in Inuktitut only. Avatak publishes books by itself or by association with other publishers. Most of their books are presented on the Nunavik Publications website. It includes traditional knowledge books, historical, archaeological, and anthropological books, but also novels, biographies, and children books about historical and geographical facts, but also based on traditional knowledge. Let's now have a look at Milik Publishing. Milik was founded in 2003 in Nuuk, Greenland. It publishes children's books, fiction, as well as books about art, culture, and social condition in Greenland. According to the publisher, Milik publishes books for children, young people, and adults, and is wide-ranging, ranging from books on Greenland culture and history to large photo books, comics, songbooks, therapy books, and poetry collections. The most important thing is that the book make a difference, set something in motion, and that they have a nice design and a good quality. Based on the WorldCat catalog, Milik published 214 printed books from 2005 to 2020, half of them published in Greenlandic, 1/3 in Danish, and the rest in English and other languages. The publisher also greatly supports young authors, helping them to write a short story, making them known, and sometimes allowing them to publish a book by their own. Milik initiated worldwide success of novelist Nivia Cornelissen, with her novel Homo Sapien, now the most translated Inuit book, published in 2014, followed incorporation by Blomsterdalen in 2020. Finally, Milik is largely involved in children's literature, many of them based on traditional knowledge, figures, and tales. As we can see for Inuit publishers, youth literature is an important part of their production and mandate. They all publish in Inuktitut, but also in their own colonial language, be it Danish, English, or French. And finally, traditional knowledge transmission is at the core of the young people book production for the Inuit. One of the books published by Milik, a contemporary tale on climate change entitled Sila and written by Greenlandic author Lana Hansen, involves the use of traditional Inuit knowledge to send a political message, both to Greenlanders and to the people of the rest of the world, about the urgency of action against climate change. In her book, Lana Hansen uses both the concepts of the traditional knowledge of Sila and Nuna and reinterprets a Sedna figure to promote an environmental pedagogy based on story rather than science. For her, it is through the transmission of stories and legends that one can convince to change behavior. She anchored her story Sila in the Inuit cultural tradition. In updating the Circumpolar legend of Sedna, she wants to bring environmental issues into everyday narratives and practices. Sedna, the mother of the sea, is one of the oldest Inuit figures. Living in the depth of the sea, she controls in her own way the fate of humans, but in return, they can influence her if they find how to do it in the right manner. Lana Hansen's book proposes an adaptation of the myth of Sedna, who, as a punishment for the bad treatment of the environment by humans, disrupts the climate. A boy must seduce Sedna by giving her the gifts he has collected from Arctic animals and then combing her hair. Thus, the world would understand the urgency of climate change and can be saved. Hansen first wrote this book in Greenlandic, her mother tongue. The publication of Sila marks both a break and a continuation in Greenlandic literature. The latter, first inspired by traditional tales, hunter stories, then by social realism and political commitment, revisits today its mythical figures such as the Kivitok and Sedna. Hansen's pedagogical and environmentalist commitment shifts the stake of literary engagement, but it's still part of a tradition through the attention given to nature. Hansen's story demonstrates how Inuit culture can help explain to children in a simple way the need to become aware of the importance of climate change. The Greenlandic and Danish edition of Sila were launched by their publisher Milik in 2009 in Nuuk and a few days later in Copenhagen. Milik took also the initiative to have Hansen's tale translated and published in English. Hansen's book was also being translated in Northern Sami in 2017. We just launched in 2020 a translation in French, as well as a translation into Inuktitut in cooperation with Avatak Cultural Institute, which is one of the first literary translations between two Inuit languages. Lana Hansen books carries a political message. As the author says, I am concerned about climate change. Their acceleration is important. Inuit are the ones who have to adapt as quickly as possible. Nature is changing and Inuit must change. Hansen gives her story a depth that goes beyond a mere pedagogy and calls for a holistic conception of the living world. She does this using the concept of Nuna and Sila, which encompasses humans animals, and resources. In an interview, Lana Hansen recounts that this story was told to her by her mother many times before she was taught at school. The figure thus makes it possible to explain the respect of the laws of nature. By transforming the traditional myth of Sedna, she based herself on ancient heritage and values long shared by the Inuit, but updated and adapted to contemporary issues. The Mother of the Sea serves as a symbol that we should protect nature, she says, not exploit and pollute it. Writing a story about climate change is therefore part of a cultural, literary, and political strategy to convince Greenlanders of the need to think about climate change from their own perspective, borrowing from the geographical context of the Arctic and from Inuit mythology. It is about enabling Greenlanders to convince the rest of the world how the Arctic can also contribute through its original concepts, Sila and Nuna, to find solutions for the survival of the humanity. In conclusion, we can see that Inuit book productions is now in large part controlled by the Inuit themselves, that children book production is at the core of the mandate of most Inuit publishers, which includes in these stories elements of Inuit traditional knowledge. In the case of Lana Hansen's book, the political involvement on climate change is based on the use and reinterpretation of major traditional Inuit figures and concepts, which is a clear and positive sign of a new mode of transmission of this knowledge towards the younger generation. Thank you.